Hi, I'm Lorraine. One morning, I walked into my own kitchen and found my sister's fiancé pouring coffee like he lived there. My mother just smiled and said, "Time for a real man to take over." They moved him into my house, without asking, without shame, like I was just a placeholder in my own life, but they never checked whose name was on the deed, and by the time they realized, I had already changed the locks. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. I had only meant to run out for a few groceries, the kind of errand you do in leggings and a hoodie, hair tied back, invisible to the world. But when I turned onto my street and saw the unfamiliar black pickup parked in my driveway, half crooked as if it owned the place, my stomach dropped. The engine had cooled, but the tires still pressed deep into the gravel, and I could see faint footprints on the path. And then came the voice. "I think you'll love the view from the kitchen. She's kept it mostly the way it was. Just needs a man's touch." It was my mother. I froze on the sidewalk for a second, grocery bag in hand, trying to convince myself I had misheard. But as I got closer, I could make out her laugh, that tight, nasal laugh she saved for moments when she was being especially performative. I pushed open the door. It wasn't even locked. Inside, I found her standing in the middle of my living room, gesturing like a real estate agent. My sister Becca leaned against the doorway to the kitchen, all smiles, while a tall man with a smug jawline and gelled hair nodded like he already owned the place. "Mom?" I asked slowly. She turned. "Oh, Lorraine, perfect timing." Becca waved half-heartedly. Grant, her fiancé, I remembered, just looked me up and down like he was already calculating where his pool table would go. "What's going on?" I asked, scanning the space. My grandmother's floral rug was still under the coffee table, the one I had vacuumed just yesterday. But the air felt shifted, claimed. "We were just showing Grant around," Mom said, patting his arm like he was some kind of prized Labrador. "You know, familiarizing him with the place." I blinked. "Familiarizing him with what place? This is my house." Becca chuckled. "Oh, come on, Grandma left it to all of us." My grip tightened on the bag of tomatoes in my hand. "No, she didn't. The deed's in my name. You know that." Mom raised an eyebrow. "Well, legalities aside, we're family, and Grant's going to be part of this family soon." "That doesn't mean," I started, but she cut me off. "He needs a place to stay while he interviews," she said airily. "His lease is up, and this house has plenty of space." I felt heat creep up my neck. "You didn't even ask me." Mom gave a little shrug. "I didn't think I had to." That's when she said it. "This isn't even your house," she snapped, smile still plastered on. "It was your grandmother's. She wanted us to share it. All of us." I stood there stunned. "No, she didn't," I said, my voice low. "She left it to me, alone. I have the will." But Mom kept her eyes on Grant, not even bothering to argue the facts. And then, like pouring salt on an open wound, she added, "Time for a real man to take over this place. Maybe it'll finally feel like a home." Grant smirked. "Can't wait to hang that dartboard." That was it. That was the moment. Not the part where she lied, not even the part where she walked a stranger through my house like she owned it. It was the way she looked at me, like I was in the way, like I didn't matter. I nodded slowly, turned on my heel, and walked upstairs. The house felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the fact that someone had moved the framed photo of Grandma off the hallway table. I found it tossed face down in a drawer of the sideboard. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the picture I'd put on the nightstand. Grandma in her garden hat, holding a basket of tulips. "I don't even feel like I belong in my own house," I whispered. And that night, I slept with my bedroom door locked, for the first time since Grandma passed. I woke up to the deep thump of bass rattling through the floorboards. It took me a second to remember why I'd locked my bedroom door last night. Then it all came back. Grant's smug grin, Mom's dismissive tone, and Becca's silence like a rubber stamp on everything. I sat up slowly, heart already tightening in my chest. The hallway smelled like burnt bacon and cheap cologne. When I opened my door, barefoot and still in my robe, I nearly bumped into a half-naked Grant, shirtless, humming, and holding my favorite blue ceramic coffee mug. Grandma's mug, the one with the chip on the handle and tiny violets around the rim. "Oh, hey," he said casually, taking a long sip without looking at me. "Hope you don't mind. I couldn't find the other mugs. This one just felt right." I stood frozen for a beat, staring at the steaming cup in his hand. "That's not yours." He smiled, totally unfazed. "Guess it is now. Want some coffee? I made a pot." Without waiting for my answer, he walked back into the kitchen like he owned the place. I followed slowly, passing by the living room, and stopped cold. He'd rearranged the furniture. The throw pillows were tossed into a plastic storage bin. The quilt Grandma made for me was folded in a lopsided pile on the floor. And the ficus I'd nurtured for 6 years? Gone. I found it on the back porch later, wilting in direct sun. "I just shifted a few things around," Grant said, pouring himself another cup. "Open space helps the energy flow. Feng shui, you know?" I didn't respond. I was too busy staring at the fridge. He'd reorganized it. My labeled containers shoved to the back, his muscle shakes front and center, along with his almond milk and cartons of egg whites. "You touched my fridge?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Grant looked over his shoulder and shrugged. "Just making the place more efficient. I like to keep things tight and easy to find. You'll get used to it." Before I could speak, his phone rang on speaker. "Hey, babe," he answered without shame. "Yeah, I'm at our place. Feels great to finally be settled. Can't wait for you to see it." "Our place?" I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. That afternoon, I heard a car door slam. Then another. Becca appeared at the front door with 2 massive suitcases in tow and a Live Laugh Love tote slung over her shoulder. Behind her, Gloria walked in like she'd just closed a real estate deal. "Don't look so shocked, honey," Gloria chirped. "It's just until the wedding." I blinked. "You didn't ask me." Becca gave me a polite, distant smile. "Hey, Lorraine, cute dress." It wasn't a dress. It was my housecoat. They moved in like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I was the one intruding. Becca put her bags in the hallway without asking where to go. Gloria opened the pantry and started organizing snacks for the couple. And Grant, still shirtless, flopped onto the couch and flipped on ESPN. By early evening, I was curled up with a book in the guest room. My room, apparently, when I heard it. "Babe, we'll need the master. The lighting's way better in there for your makeup table." I didn't even realize I'd dropped my book. I walked into the hallway slowly. Grant and Becca stood outside my bedroom door. Grandma's room. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Grant turned. "Oh, yeah, that room's just a better fit. The sunlight hits different. Perfect for Becca's wedding prep." I stared at them. The bed in that room still had Grandma's quilt. Her journals were in the nightstand drawer. That room was hers, then mine. It wasn't available. "No," I said quietly. Gloria stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, Lorraine, don't be dramatic. It's just a room. Your sister's getting married. Let her enjoy the space." "She didn't ask." "She didn't need to," Gloria replied, her tone clipped. "You're always so territorial." Territorial? I stood still as Becca slipped past me and opened the door to my room. She gasped, "Oh, wow. This is perfect." My chest tightened as I watched her step in like it was a hotel suite waiting for her. Later that night, I sat on the hardwood floor of what used to be my sanctuary. My knees pulled up, arms wrapped around them. In one hand, I clutched the deed with my name on it. In the other, I held Grandma's will, notarized, signed, stored away in my drawer all these years just in case. "They really think I'm just going to hand everything over, don't they?" I whispered. There was no reply, just the muffled sound of laughter coming from the master bedroom, my bedroom. I wiped my cheek with the sleeve of my robe, then reached for the bottom drawer, where I kept things I hadn't touched since the funeral. The air inside still smelled faintly of lavender sachets. I pulled out a folder, thick and yellowed with age. Time to remember who actually built this house and who she left it to. That morning, I slipped out of bed before the sun had fully risen. The hallway was dim, but the house already buzzed with activity. A low, mechanical whir vibrated through the floorboards, followed by the unmistakable rattle of metal against plaster. I tightened my robe and walked toward the living room. Grant stood in the center of my wall, drilling anchors for a flat-screen TV. Cans of navy blue paint and unopened IKEA boxes crowded the hallway. The smell of synthetic leather and sawdust hung heavy in the air. I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "Morning," he said without looking away from his level tool. "Just adding some upgrades." My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice smooth. "Did you ask first?" He turned, half grin, sweat glistening down his temple. "I thought we'd agreed it's all of ours now. Makes sense to modernize the space." "We?" I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. In the kitchen, my favorite mug, the handmade ceramic one with a hummingbird handle, was gone. In its place was a sleek stainless steel monstrosity stamped G&B. Coffee bubbled in a new digital machine I'd never seen before. I opened the trash to toss a used napkin and saw something folded sharply between a pizza box and some plastic wrap. A receipt. Out of habit, I smoothed it out. 1409.27, furniture, decor. Paid by Becca Grant, shipping address, mine. I didn't blink. Just took out my phone, snapped a photo, and opened a new message to my lawyer. Subject, documentation. I didn't send it right away, I just saved it in drafts. But I'd typed every word. Around 3 in the afternoon, as I was folding laundry upstairs, I heard the front door fly open. "Where do you want the second bag, babe?" Becca's voice rang out like she owned the walls. A second later, Gloria appeared outside my door without knocking. Her arms were crossed, that same faux sweet tone she used when I was little and she was hiding something. "Becca's moving in," she said, "just until the wedding. Don't make this difficult." I looked her dead in the eye. "No one asked me." She scoffed. "Lorraine, don't be so territorial. It's not like you're using all this space." Becca popped her head in behind her, wearing heels in my carpeted hallway. "Hi, Lorraine," she chirped. "You have such quaint taste. Can't wait to give it some flair." I didn't answer. Instead, I went downstairs, opened a window, and let the cold air hit my face. I just needed 5 minutes to remember I wasn't invisible. That evening, just as I was finishing up a pot of lentil stew, more out of habit than hunger, Gloria stormed into the kitchen. "Company's coming," she announced. "Family dinner, Uncle Rick, Aunt May, cousins, all of them." I paused, ladle halfway to the bowl. "Tonight?" "Yes, and it'll be great for Becca and Grant to show off their new place." I turned to face her slowly. "Their what?" She flinched, just barely. "You know what I mean. Don't ruin this for everyone." By 7, the house buzzed with conversation, clinking glasses and the scent of store-bought candles Becca had lit in every room. I stayed by the stove. No one asked if I wanted to join the wine circle. No one even looked in my direction unless they needed a refill. When I handed Aunt May a fresh napkin, she smiled at me and said, "Wow. Becca and Grant have done wonders with this place. It doesn't even look like how Lorraine used to keep it." I nodded. "I wouldn't expect it to." They laughed like I'd made a joke. I stirred the stew and blinked hard. Gloria raised her glass later and said, "Here's to Becca and Grant, their first real step toward a shared life." Applause. I was still in my apron, holding a used dish towel, heart pounding in my ears. Later that night, as the laughter echoed from the living room and Becca played DJ from her phone, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor. The same floor I vacuumed every Saturday since Grandma passed. I looked around the room, my grandmother's quilt still folded on the bench, the soft hum of the same lamp that used to sit beside her reading chair. None of them saw me anymore. They didn't want to. I wasn't the host, I was the help. But I didn't scream. I didn't fight. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into my real estate account, and drafted a message. Subject, discreet inquiry. Property status update. I reread it twice, then hovered over send. And then I clicked. By the time they were passing around second helpings of cheesecake and laughing like they owned the walls around them, I'd already sent the email, the one that started everything. The next morning, just before the sun crested the neighbor's roofline, I stepped outside. Dew clung to my slippers, and the hydrangeas I planted last spring had started to open, blue like cracked porcelain. I cradled a warm mug of black coffee in both hands, took one breath in, and sent a short message to my realtor. Ready to move forward. Keep it quiet. They were still asleep. Becca had a late shift, and Grant usually needed 3 alarms just to stir. Gloria's door was closed, though she always claimed to be up with the birds. Good. Let them sleep. I changed into something decent, grabbed the file folder I'd kept tucked behind the cereal boxes, trust documents, deed copies, correspondence, and drove 20 minutes to my lawyer's office in Red Bank. Marion had been our family's estate attorney for over 30 years. She'd drafted my grandmother's original trust, and when I walked into her waiting room, she looked up and said, "Lorraine, I wondered when you'd come." We sat in her office with the blinds drawn, light slicing through the edges like truth waiting to leak in. I placed the folder on her desk. "I need to know if they have any claim to the house," I said. "Gloria's been acting like it's hers, and now my nephew and his wife are living there." Without asking. Marion pulled on her reading glasses and started flipping through the paperwork. 5 minutes in, she stopped, smiled faintly, and pushed a page toward me. "This house," she said gently, tapping the highlighted paragraph, "was placed in an irrevocable trust under your name only. Your grandmother made sure of it. Your mother isn't a beneficiary. No one else is." I sat back. She added, "You could evict them today if you wanted, but I assume you want a quieter route." I nodded. "I do, but I want a paper trail in place." We went over options. I asked her to begin drafting a formal letter of ownership confirmation, just in case things escalated. Marion, bless her, understood without me having to say more. By the time I left her office, I felt something shift, not anger, not even relief, just clarity. On the drive home, I stopped at a corner cafe, ordered a turkey sandwich, and reviewed notes on my phone. I had 2 online listings saved in draft and a private viewing form ready to deploy. Once home, I stepped into my converted office, the room they all assumed I barely used anymore. I locked the door behind me, opened the real estate dashboard, entered the square footage, uploaded the photos I'd taken weeks ago before they started cluttering everything with plastic plants and wall decals. I scheduled showings for Tuesdays and Thursdays between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., Grant and Becca were usually gone during those hours. I selected no lawn signage, discreet contact only, and left a note for my realtor. "Please screen buyers carefully. I want a clean, respectful transaction." Then I hit publish. That night, Becca was the first to crack. She knocked, didn't wait for me to answer, then walked into the kitchen while I was unloading the dishwasher. "Something's off," she said, crossing her arms. "You've been cold lately." I didn't look at her. "I've been working. You remember what that's like, right?" She scoffed. "You don't have to be so moody all the time. We're family." I shut the dishwasher. "Then maybe act like it." She flinched at that but didn't leave. Grant wandered in behind her, half a banana in his hand. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between us. Becca jumped in. "Your aunt's being passive-aggressive." I turned toward them both and said plainly, "You're guests. Try acting like it." Grant chuckled, but it was hollow. "We'll be owners soon enough?" I didn't respond, just walked past him to refill my glass of water, let them think what they wanted. The truth was in motion already. Later that night, after they went upstairs, I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I labeled it Occupancy Deductions, Column A, Item, Column B, Date of Purchase, Column C, Amount, Column D, Who authorized it. The first row read, "Living room furniture, $1,489, May 12th, not authorized." Then utilities, grocery bills I'd covered without comment, and the garden lights Gloria ordered from some online site and installed without asking. I estimated what percentage they used, 50% for electricity, 70% for water, and made notes. At the bottom of the sheet I typed, "To be deducted from final proceeds if applicable." Then I saved it in a folder labeled Invoice and closed the lid on my laptop. The house was quiet, for now. But the next morning when I opened the door to let in the breeze, I froze. A man in a beige windbreaker stood on my porch, clipboard in one hand, DSLR camera in the other. "Hi there," he said with a friendly smile. "I'm here for the private showing." I didn't even flinch. When I opened the door that morning and saw a woman in a pressed blazer, clipboard in hand and a camera slung over her shoulder, I simply smiled and stepped aside. "Good morning," I said, my voice light. "Come on in. We'll start with the backyard." The scent of lavender drifted through the open screen as I led her past the kitchen, out onto the stone path I'd laid myself the year after Grandma died. The early light filtered through the maple tree overhead, dappled across the herb garden. "It gets excellent sun until about 11, I said, pointing to the basil and thyme spilling over the planter edges. "If you're into cooking, it's a dream." She nodded, scribbled a note, then took a few photos. Behind her, I caught the faintest flicker of motion in the kitchen window curtain. I knew that shape. Becca. Watching. She'd been lounging around for weeks like this place was already hers, but she hadn't read the fine print. Or any print, really. Over the next few days, I kept the showings quiet, scheduled late mornings or early afternoons when I knew Becca and Grant would be at the gym or getting their endless lattes. The realtor and I coordinated everything via email and text. No for sale sign, no flyers, just quiet movement. It almost worked. Until Wednesday. I was upstairs organizing some documents when I heard the door open and the polite voice of a man, one of the prospective buyers from earlier, say, "Oh, you must be the sister. Lorraine said you'd be moved out by June." Silence, then Becca's voice, sharp as broken glass. "Excuse me?" By the time I got downstairs, the man was gone. The door hung open, and Becca stood in the hallway, trembling, not with fear but fury. "You listed the house? You're selling it?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and took a sip. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" she snapped. "This is our family home." "No," I said, finally looking at her. "It was Grandma's. Now it's mine." That night, the shouting started. Gloria stormed into my bedroom like she had every right, not bothering to knock. Her face was flushed, a strand of her dyed auburn hair stuck to her forehead. "Are you completely out of your mind?" she barked. "This is Becca's future. This was supposed to be her home." I stood slowly, my pulse steady. I'd rehearsed this. Without a word, I reached for the navy blue folder on my desk and opened it to the page marked with a yellow sticky tab. Then I handed it to her. "This is the deed," I said. "And the trust, irrevocable, transferred to me in full when Grandma passed. You never had access. Neither did Becca, or anyone." She stared at it for a beat, then sat, hard, on the edge of the bed. Becca and Grant appeared in the doorway. "Mom?" Becca whispered. Gloria looked up, but her expression had changed. Gone was the usual dominance. It had wilted into something like disbelief. I took the folder back and flipped to the last page. "Would you like me to read it aloud?" I asked, not out of cruelty, but clarity. No one stopped me. "In accordance with the legal stipulations of the Cole Family Trust, this property shall not be transferred, rented, or occupied without the written consent of the sole heir, Lorraine Annette Cole." I paused, then looked up. Becca blinked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Grant ran a hand through his hair. "You could have just told us." "I tried," I said, my voice low. "But you never listened." No one said anything, so I placed the folder on the dining room table, right next to a half-drunk mug of Becca's coffee. "Open house is Sunday," I added. "You'll want to clear out by noon." Then I turned and walked upstairs. There was no slamming, no final insult, just the sound of them frozen in place, like statues made of bad decisions and entitlement. That night, I slept with the windows open, and by morning, the offers had already started pouring in. By the time they realized I was serious, the offers had already started pouring in. I had 3 second showing appointments lined up, 1 full-price cash offer on the table, and another investor flying in from Denver just to tour the place. I poured a fresh cup of coffee as a couple stepped off the front porch, beaming. The woman turned, holding her partner's hand. "We just love the exposed beams and all this natural light," she said with a hopeful smile. I smiled back, eyes following them out the driveway. She loved those beams too. My grandmother built this place with her bare hands. As the door clicked shut, I let out a slow breath. I hadn't said that out loud before. Not in a long time. Later that afternoon, I was wiping down the kitchen counters when I heard my name softly from the hallway. "Lorraine?" It was Mom. She appeared in the doorway holding a framed photo of Grandma, the one from the garden party where we'd all worn hats and drank sweet tea from chipped mason jars. She held it like a holy relic. "She would have wanted us to stick together," Gloria said, voice trembling, carefully rehearsed. "She'd be heartbroken if she saw this happening." I didn't respond at first. I just stared at the photo. The lace gloves, Grandma's proud, sun-wrinkled smile, the wind chime in the corner of the shot. Then I took the frame from her gently, resting it on the side table. "Then you should have remembered that before handing my bedroom to strangers," I said quietly. Mom's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered, like she hadn't expected a reply, like she thought guilt might still work on me. She didn't say anything else, just turned and left, the soft padding of her slippers disappearing down the hall. By the end of the week, there had been 12 showings. One couple even brought their contractor. Becca, meanwhile, had begun muttering loud enough for the walls to hear. "It's creepy, all these strangers walking around like they already live here," she spat, folding laundry that I knew was mostly mine. "Who wants a house with this many ghosts?" I didn't bite. Instead, I stepped outside to water the potted hydrangeas by the porch. From the backyard, I saw Grant pacing, phone pressed to his ear, agitation in his gait. "I told you we need more time," he snapped into the receiver. "We've got setbacks, okay? Unexpected ones." He saw me watching and turned his back. That night, while loading dishes into the washer, I noticed something small missing. A navy wool throw blanket that had sat folded on the corner of the sofa for years. A gift from Aunt Esther, one of the last things she ever gave me. I turned to Grant, who had just walked in from the garage. "Did you move the blue blanket from the living room?" He shrugged. "Sold it. We needed to make space." "Sold it?" I repeated. "Yeah, on that local swap site. It's just a blanket." I nodded. "Right." He was already halfway down the hall whistling, but something in my gut twisted. I dried my hands and walked quietly to my bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept my credit card statements. I'd been paying for the mortgage and utilities for years. Why stop there? Sure enough, the most recent digital copy was already loaded on my laptop. I scanned the charges. Groceries, hardware store. Then one entry stood out. Rustic Renovation Co. $2,470. My stomach dropped. Billing address? My home. I scrolled back to the previous months. Nothing. This was new. That same evening, after a quick call to the credit card company, I printed the transaction, slipped it into a file folder, and laid it on my desk, next to the trust deed, next to the inspection report, next to the growing pile of proof that I hadn't imagined any of this. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I made myself a cup of mint tea and sat on the porch under the fading orange sky. They wanted a house to start their future, I whispered to myself. They'll have to find it somewhere else. That thought didn't come from a place of vengeance. It came from clarity. A line had been crossed, and for once, I wasn't the one being asked to apologize for seeing it. 3 days later, we held the final showing. Gloria peeked her head into the kitchen and asked, "Should I bake cookies?" It always made the house smell warm. I turned and looked at her, cool but not cruel. "No need," I said. "There won't be another." I didn't answer Gloria's question about the cookies. I just moved past her, walked to the kitchen sink, and ran the water. Outside the window, a Cadillac pulled up. Then a BMW, a Lexus right behind it. Sunday afternoon sun angled through the maple trees, casting long golden shadows across the walkway. I arranged a small bouquet, lavender and soft yellow tulips, into a wide ceramic vase. As I set it down on the entryway table, I caught my own reflection in the glass of the front door. My eyes looked tired, but clear. "Let's close this chapter," I whispered. By 2 o'clock, the open house was in full swing. The air buzzed with quiet chatter and careful footsteps on the hardwood floors. The scent of furniture polish, fresh-cut flowers, and something vaguely citrusy filled the house. Then my realtor, Dana, pulled me aside near the stairwell. Her voice was low but urgent. "Lorraine, someone called the bank this morning, tried to claim joint residency, said the house was improperly listed." I blinked. "Let me guess, Becca?" Dana nodded grimly. "I already verified the deed and the ownership chain. We're good, but it spooked one of the buyers, you should know." I didn't flinch. I just pulled out my phone, walked onto the porch where the noise dimmed, and tapped the name I had saved under legal armor. "John? It's time." An hour later, he walked through the front door wearing a navy suit and an expression carved from stone. John Wexley, my attorney for nearly a decade, held a thick file in one hand and a rolled scroll of documents in the other. Grant spotted him first. He stepped out from the sunroom, puffed up like a rooster. "You can't just barge in here and throw us out. This is our home, too." John raised an eyebrow and didn't even stop walking. "Actually," he said coolly, "you've been trespassing for several weeks. Shall we clarify that now, or would you like me to involve the sheriff?" Becca emerged behind Grant, her jaw tight. "Lorraine, this is insane. You're ruining the family." I turned slowly, folding my arms. "No, Becca, you did that. I'm just cleaning up." John cleared his throat, then unfurled the document and began reading. "Cease and desist order, effective immediately. Becca Reyes and Grant Holloway are to vacate the premises. You are not on the deed. You are not registered tenants. You have no legal right to reside here or interfere with its sale." A ripple of silence passed through the crowd of potential buyers. One man near the fireplace gave a low whistle and nudged his wife. "Dramatic bonus feature included?" he murmured. She giggled. Grant's face darkened. "You think this makes you look smart, Lorraine? You think these people care about your little legal stunt?" "I think," I said, voice calm and even, "that these people care about honesty, which, if I recall, isn't your area of expertise." Becca's mouth twitched. She opened it, no doubt to hurl another accusation, but John spoke before she could. "You have 10 minutes to collect anything that legally belongs to you. That doesn't include linens, cookware, or that decorative vase you borrowed from Lorraine's guest suite." For once, Becca didn't argue. She turned and stormed down the hall. Grant followed her, muttering curses under his breath. I remained rooted by the front door, arms still folded. Dana gave me a small nod of reassurance, then turned back to smoothing the experience for the lingering buyers. 15 minutes later, Grant and Becca returned to the entryway, each with one small duffel bag. Becca clutched her phone like it was oxygen. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "You've made a public spectacle of this." "I'm not happy," I replied, "but I'm no longer ashamed. There's a difference." Grant opened the door. Becca hesitated, just for a breath, then followed him out without another word. They walked down the path slowly, as if expecting me to call them back. I didn't. I waited until their car disappeared down the road before turning back to face the house. Buyers still milled around. Dana had shifted their attention toward the back patio and garden, gently steering them away from the drama that had unfolded moments earlier. I stood in the foyer, letting the stillness wash over me. "You used me," I whispered to the empty space. "You stole from me, and you thought I'd just let it slide." But I hadn't. Not this time. Later that evening, when the house had emptied out and twilight settled in, Dana brought me the paperwork. She set it gently on the kitchen island, alongside a glass of wine and a pen. "You ready?" I nodded. "Tonight," I said, "we sign. Tomorrow morning, this house won't belong to me anymore." I pressed the pen to the first page. But for the first time in years, I'll finally feel at home. I didn't sleep much that night, not from stress but from clarity, the kind that sharpens your thoughts like glass, clean and sharp. Just before dawn, I brewed a quiet cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen island one final time, and let the silence settle around me. The papers were signed. The house was no longer mine. By 8:30, I was standing at the front door, suitcase in hand. I paused, letting my fingers trace the groove in the wooden frame, the one Grant had nicked years ago while moving in a couch he insisted on keeping. Funny how something so small can outlast the person who made it matter. I pulled the door shut behind me. No hesitation. I didn't look back. The realtor had arranged for me to drop the keys off at the office on Main, just a 15-minute walk. I didn't want a ride. I needed that walk. Each step felt like peeling off a layer of my old life. It was warm for a Monday morning in late September. Sunlight fell in patches across the sidewalk. School buses rumbled past, and a dog barked at a squirrel from a porch I used to wave at. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but I had. When I reached the real estate office, I stepped inside and approached the front desk. "I'm here to leave the keys," I said, handing over the labeled envelope. A woman stepped out from the hallway, smiling, late 30s maybe, her curls pulled into a neat bun. "Lorraine?" she asked. I nodded. She extended her hand. "I'm Tasha, the new owner." It took me a second to register it. "Oh, hi, congratulations." She tilted her head. "You probably don't remember me. Years ago, you gave a talk at the North Haven Women's Shelter. I was there, with my daughter. You said something that stayed with me. You said, 'Survival isn't shameful, staying silent is.'" I never forgot it. My eyes welled unexpectedly. "You're the buyer?" She nodded. "We'd been saving for a long time. When I saw the listing, I don't know. It felt right." A laugh escaped me, half astonishment, half grace. "Looks like life's good at tying up its own loose ends." We talked for a bit, about paint colors, the garden, the light in the kitchen in the mornings. She said her daughter was now in college. I congratulated her. Then, without ceremony, I handed over the keys. As I stepped out into the street again, I felt something loosen in my chest, like a knot undone. I walked past the local cafe where Becca and I used to split muffins when she pretended to care. Past the park where Grant once brought me flowers, cheap gas station ones, but back then, I thought they meant something. I passed the bookstore, where I'd hidden during my lowest weeks. Books had always been kinder than people. It was strange. How many versions of myself had walked these sidewalks? The obedient wife, the silenced sister, the invisible daughter, and now, none of those things. Just Lorraine, on her own 2 feet. By noon, I was back at the small studio apartment I'd been renting quietly for months. Gloria had helped me furnish it. "You need a sanctuary," she said, the night she brought over a handmade quilt and a bottle of red. But today, I wasn't settling in. I had an appointment. Upstate wasn't far, just 2 hours by car. I drove in comfortable quiet, letting the fall colors blur past. Trees were starting to turn, gold, red, a bit of stubborn green still hanging on, just like me. The property was modest. A 5-acre stretch of land nestled behind a line of trees, not far from a lake. The cabin that stood there now was old and empty, but I didn't need much. I was meeting with a contractor, someone Gloria recommended. He met me at the gate, clipboard in hand. "So what are we building?" he asked. I took a breath. "Not a shelter," I said, "more like a retreat. For women coming out of, well, war zones that looked like families." He nodded, letting the silence fill in the blanks. "Private rooms? Natural light? Solar-powered, ideally. A communal kitchen, garden out back, a library if we can manage it, a place where no one yells at you to shrink." The contractor smiled. "You've thought about this." "I've lived it." We walked the land. He took notes, pointed at things I couldn't yet visualize, but I trusted the bones would come together. Late in the afternoon, we sat on a folding bench and reviewed a rough blueprint. It wasn't final, but it was real. As I signed the initial draft, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "This time," I said, almost to myself, "I'm building something no one can take from me." He nodded. "Looks like the beginning of something good." Driving back as dusk crept in, I didn't feel tired. I felt weightless. For the first time in a long while, my future wasn't something to survive. It was something I got to choose. I heated up leftovers, poured a glass of water, and flipped through the blueprint again at my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, but not lonely. There was a difference. Then, just as I was rinsing my cup, a knock echoed through the door. It was too late for deliveries. I wasn't expecting anyone. I dried my hands slowly, walked toward the door, and opened it. And there was my mother. It wasn't a loud knock. In fact, it was soft enough I almost didn't hear it over the sound of gravel crunching under the boots of a contractor walking across the far end of the property, but something about it made me pause. I opened the door slowly, not expecting anyone. And there she was, my mother, Gloria. Her gray hair was pulled back, though messily, and the lines around her mouth looked deeper. She was holding a plain brown paper bag. "I thought maybe you'd want some peach scones," she said. For a beat, I just stood there, one hand still on the doorframe. The smell of fresh lumber floated in from the work site behind me. I hadn't seen her in person since the day I walked away. The weight of that absence sat heavily between us. She shifted from foot to foot, eyes darting behind me, as if trying to glimpse some version of the life I'd built without her. I stepped aside. "You can come in," I said simply. The small guest suite I'd been staying in while the retreat center was under construction was still sparse. Just a bed, a worn leather chair, and a folding table near the window. Gloria stepped in and looked around like she was walking into a memory she didn't belong to. "You always liked quiet places," she said softly. I offered no reply, just gestured for her to sit. We didn't speak at first. The only sound was the faint hum of a circular saw in the distance. She sat across from me at the little table, placing the bag down with both hands like it might break. Then she looked up. "I didn't know what Becca was doing," she began, her voice cracking. "I just wanted the family to stay close. I didn't think—" "You didn't think it mattered," I cut in, gently but firmly. "You wanted to keep the peace, no matter what it cost me." Gloria blinked and her lower lip trembled. I thought if we kept things simple, no big waves, it'd all settle. "You mean if I stayed quiet, if I let it go, like I always did?" She looked away toward the window. "I didn't see how much it was hurting you," she whispered. "You didn't want to see," I said, "because if you had, you'd have had to choose, and you chose comfort." There was no venom in my voice, just clarity. She began to cry, softly. Not the theatrical sobs I'd seen before when she wanted sympathy, but the kind of weeping that happens when something finally cracks open inside. I didn't reach for her hand. I couldn't. That part of me wasn't available anymore. For a while, we just sat there, the silence holding space where words never could. Finally, I stood and walked to the open door. "I'm not angry anymore," I said as I turned back to face her. "But I'm not going back either." She looked up at me, eyes rimmed red. I gestured out toward the field, where a group of women were helping mark a spot for the garden. A gentle breeze lifted the edge of the blueprints one of them held. "This is my home now," I continued. "Not the one you tried to turn against me. This is mine." Gloria's shoulders slumped, but she gave a small nod. "So this is goodbye?" "No," I said. "It's closure." She stood, wiped her cheeks with a crumpled tissue, and nodded again. "They're beautiful, you know, the women out there. You're building something real." "I hope so." She lingered a moment longer at the threshold, then stepped outside. The screen door clicked softly behind her. Later that evening, after the sun had dipped behind the trees and the golden light stretched long shadows across the ground, I walked outside with a mug of tea in hand. The scent of fresh sawdust mixed with pine. It smelled like promise. Across the yard, Maya, the woman overseeing design, waved at me with rolled blueprints in her hand. I lifted my cup in reply. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the quiet sink into my bones. Not the hollow kind of silence I used to live in, but the kind that feels earned, whole. This time, I wasn't rebuilding from what had been broken. This time I was building from truth. Sometimes family isn't who you were born to, it's who respects your peace when you finally build it. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect yourself? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.